Before the pyramids reached for the sky, before Stonehenge cast its shadows on the solstice, there was a land between two rivers where humanity's first true cities rose like visions from the mind of a god. We call them the Sumerians. Yet they never called themselves that. To them, they were the Sag Giga, the black-headed people, and their home Sumer was a web of shining city-states carved from the mud and mystery of ancient Mesopotamia. It is here that the first words were written, not carved on monuments to kings, but pressed into wet clay the way one might press a seal into wax. Here, the first laws were etched, the first epic poems sung, the first bureaucrats, yes, even they, were born. Civilization itself sprouted in this fertile crescent. But where did they come from? This, even now, is the shadow over their shining legacy. Archaeology shows us the sudden appearance of complex cities, sophisticated art, advanced agriculture, and writing, as if a spark had been lit in human consciousness almost overnight. No clear migration, no obvious pre-Sumerian people to bridge the gap. It is as though they stepped onto history's stage, already in full command of the script. And here lies the true fascination. Were they the product of slow, unseen evolution, or the inheritors of an even older, lost civilization? Some, in esoteric circles, whisper of Sumer as a seed culture, a place where knowledge from an earlier age, perhaps even from beyond the earth, was planted to take root in human soil. In this journey, we will explore the Sumerians not as a dry academic subject, but as an initiation. We will walk the streets of Uruk and Eridu, listen to the prayers of temple priestesses, and read the oldest story ever written, the Epic of Gilgamesh, not merely as literature, but as a coded message. We will examine how their innovations in writing, law, astronomy, and spirituality still echo in our lives today. And beyond the clay tablets and ruins, we will ask the deeper question: what did the Sumerians know that we have forgotten? Breathe in the desert air. Imagine the shimmer of heat over the Euphrates, the call of merchants in the marketplace, the slow toll of a temple bell. The first civilization waits for us, and it has secrets to tell. To understand the Sumerians, we must first see the world as they did, a land poised between heaven and earth, where every stone, river, and gust of wind carried the will of unseen forces. Sumer lay cradled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, in the heart of Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers. Here the soil was rich, the floods both a blessing and a curse. From this delicate balance of abundance and danger emerged not just farming villages, but city-states that seemed to rise overnight. Eridu, Uruk, Ur, Lagash. Each was its own small universe, with its own patron god or goddess, its own ziggurat, those towering, stepped temples that reached toward the sky like man-made mountains. In the Sumerian worldview, humans did not own the land. They were caretakers in a cosmic order ruled by the Anuna, the great gods. The king was not a ruler in the modern sense. He was the earthly steward of divine law. To live in Sumer was to live in constant dialogue with the heavens, where politics and religion were inseparable. This was a civilization obsessed with order, not just in their cities, but in the cosmos. The Sumerians gave us the sexagesimal system, the reason we have 60 seconds in a minute and 360 degrees in a circle. They mapped the movements of the stars not only for navigation or farming, but as a sacred duty. For them, astronomy was also astrology, the will of the gods inscribed in the night sky. And then there is the writing, cuneiform. Born from simple accounting marks pressed into clay, it evolved into a full script capable of poetry, myth, and law. This was not just a tool, it was a magical act. To write was to make something exist in both the physical and the spiritual realms. Words could bind agreements, summon blessings, or preserve memory beyond death. In many esoteric traditions, this act, turning sound into symbol, marks a leap in human consciousness. The Sumerians' myths offer us another glimpse into their philosophy. The Epic of Gilgamesh, often called the world's oldest story, is not merely an adventure. It is a meditation on mortality, friendship, and the limits of human power. In it, we find the same questions that haunt us today. Can we escape death? What does it mean to live well? And if the gods made us mortal, was it to curse us or to make our lives more precious? Perhaps the most tantalizing mystery is their origin. Archaeology shows an abrupt shift from Neolithic settlements to fully developed urban centers around 3100 BCE. Some scholars suggest migration from the north or east. Others point to a sudden surge in technology and organization that is hard to explain. In the realm of esoteric speculation, some propose that Sumer inherited fragments of a forgotten, advanced culture, Atlantis, Dilmun, or a civilization lost to time and cataclysm. In this light, the Sumerians are not just the first civilization. They are the visible crest of a wave whose deep waters remain unseen. And so we approach them not just as archaeologists of stone, but as seekers of a hidden lineage, one that may connect our modern world to the very dawn of human wisdom.
If you wandered the streets of ancient Uruk or Lagash, the first thing you would notice is that every road, every market, every household seemed to lead back to one place, the temple. The Sumerian city was not built around a palace or fortress. It was built around the ziggurat, the sacred mountain of brick that rose toward the heavens. These were not simply places of worship. They were the cosmic axis, the meeting point between earth and the divine. In Sumerian cosmology, the gods were not distant abstractions. They were living powers who could walk among humans, feast in their temples, and give or withdraw blessings. The Sumerians believed that kingship itself was a gift from the gods. In their royal inscriptions, rulers declared that they had been chosen by deities like Inanna, the radiant goddess of love and war, or Enlil, the lord of the wind and destiny. This was no symbolic gesture. To be king was to serve as the mediator between divine will and human affairs, a role as dangerous as it was exalted. And the pantheon? It was vast, complex, and deeply human in its flaws. There was Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh waters, a trickster and benefactor of humankind. Ninhursag, the mother goddess of mountains and fertility. Utu, the sun god who saw all acts and upheld justice. Each city-state had its patron deity, and devotion to that god was woven into civic identity. But devotion was not love in the modern sense. It was contract. Humans provided worship, offerings, and service. The gods, in turn, maintained the cosmic balance and prosperity of the city. This cosmic economy was the heart of Sumerian religion, and it mirrored their earthly systems of trade and law. One of their most profound contributions was the concept of meh, divine decrees or principles that governed everything, from kingship and priesthood to weaving and music. The meh were the cosmic blueprints, the invisible architecture of reality. To violate them was to invite chaos. To uphold them was to keep the world in harmony. The Sumerians encoded these principles in myth. Take the tale of Inanna's descent into the underworld. It is more than a story of a goddess visiting her sister Ereshkigal, queen of the dead. It is a symbolic journey of transformation, a reminder that even divine beings must face loss, surrender, and renewal. For the initiate, this myth was a mirror of the human soul's descent into its own depths, the stripping away of all power until only the essence remains. Even their earliest written records carry this blend of practicality and mysticism. A clay tablet might list grain rations for temple workers, and then just a few lines away recount the sacred lineage of kings stretching back to a mythical time before the flood. To the Sumerians, there was no hard line between the mundane and the sacred. Both were threads in the same tapestry. In this first glimpse into their world, we see a civilization that was not simply advanced, in the material sense, it was aligned. They understood their cities as reflections of the divine order, their laws as echoes of cosmic law, and their stories as keys to the inner journey.
If you could walk the streets of Uruk in its prime, you might think you had stumbled into a dream. Clay brick walls stretched for miles, encircling gardens, markets, and great halls. Canals laced through the city like veins, carrying life-giving water. In the heart of it all stood the Eanna Temple Complex, dedicated to Inanna, the morning and evening star, where priestesses in flowing robes tended rituals that bound the heavens to the earth. The Sumerians claimed that Uruk was the first true city in the world. In their own reckoning, its kingship descended from heaven itself. This is where we encounter one of the most mysterious texts in human history, the Sumerian King List. It records rulers who reigned not for decades, but for thousands of years, in an age before the flood. Was this poetic exaggeration, symbolic encoding of a lost era, or a fragmented memory of a civilization that predated Sumer itself? The flood they spoke of appears not only in Sumerian myth, but later in Babylonian, Hebrew, and even far-flung traditions from India to the Americas. In the Sumerian telling, the gods decided to cleanse the earth, sparing only Zusudra, forebear to all who came after. This story is more than a warning. In the esoteric tradition, the flood is the veil between ages, the great reset, after which knowledge must be replanted in new soil. And that brings us to their origins, a question wrapped in speculation. Archaeologists see a sudden flowering of culture around 3100 BCE, advanced irrigation, monumental architecture, mathematics, astronomy, and writing, appearing as if from nowhere. Some believe these were the culmination of slow developments we simply have not yet uncovered. Others, especially in mystical and alternative history circles, suspect a transfer of knowledge from an older, forgotten people, perhaps survivors of a cataclysm like the flood they remembered. Their myths hint at teachers not entirely human. The god Enki, for example, is said to have given humanity wisdom, agriculture, and the arts of civilization. In esoteric interpretation, such figures may symbolize an infusion of higher knowledge into the human story, whether by divine inspiration, contact with advanced travelers, or the awakening of latent human potential. The Sumerians' connection between heaven and earth was not metaphorical to them. Their ziggurats were cosmic ladders, their star charts maps of divine will. They measured time not simply to track the seasons, but to harmonize human life with celestial cycles. This is why the sexagesimal system endures. We still divide the circle into 360 degrees, just as they did, carrying a fragment of their cosmic order into every clock and compass today. Yet, as with all great civilizations, their brilliance contained seeds of fragility. Rivalries between city-states, environmental strain on their farmlands, and the shifting currents of power eventually led to their decline. But their legacy was absorbed by successors, Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians, like a river carrying silt downstream. Their gods changed names, but not nature. Their myths took new forms, but kept their ancient heartbeat. In this way, Sumer never truly vanished. It became the foundation upon which much of recorded history was built, its echoes still present in the way we write, measure, rule, and dream.
The Sumerians may seem impossibly distant from our modern world, yet their worldview contains principles that can be applied directly to how we live, think, and grow today. If we strip away the layers of clay and time, we find living seeds of wisdom. The first is alignment with cosmic order. The Sumerians did not see themselves as isolated individuals drifting through chaos. They saw themselves as threads in a divine fabric. Every festival, law, and harvest was timed to harmonize with celestial cycles. We can reclaim this by reintroducing rhythm into our lives. Practice 1. Personal cosmic calendar. Choose one celestial marker to follow: a moon phase, solstice, equinox, or planetary alignment. Begin one small ritual on that day, such as journaling intentions, meditating, or making an offering of gratitude. Over time, this links your personal growth with the wider rhythms of nature and the cosmos. The second is the me, living by guiding principles. The Sumerians believed in invisible laws that governed both the sacred and the everyday. In modern terms, these are our personal codes of conduct. Write down 5 core principles that define how you want to live, such as honesty, creativity, discipline, compassion, or courage. Each week, review your actions against these principles. The Sumerians understood that civilizations fall when they lose their me. So too do individuals. The third is the art of sacred remembrance. Sumerian writing was not just communication, it was preservation. What they inscribed in clay outlived their palaces. In a world where our words vanish into digital noise, remembrance is an act of defiance. Practice 3. Memory tablet. Keep a dedicated notebook where you record not just events, but lessons, dreams, and insights. Treat it as your personal archive, something that could guide someone centuries from now. The fourth is the hero's journey of Gilgamesh, a reminder that mortality gives life meaning. Gilgamesh sought immortality and returned instead with wisdom. Practice 4. The Gilgamesh reflection. Once a month, ask yourself, if my time were limited, what would matter most right now? Let this guide a small, intentional change in how you spend your energy. By applying these practices, we are not reenacting Sumerian rituals in a museum-like way. We are living the essence of their wisdom, recognizing the patterns that govern life, rooting ourselves in principle, preserving what matters, and facing the limits of time with courage. In doing so, we become modern heirs to the first great experiment in civilization, not by imitating their forms, but by carrying forward their spirit.
The Sumerians have been gone for more than 4,000 years, yet their fingerprints remain on the very fabric of our lives. We carry their measures of time in our clocks, their circles in our maps, their myths in our literature, and their laws, transformed but still recognizable, in our systems of governance. They remind us that civilization is not an accident, it is an act of alignment. The Sumerians lived as if the world were a delicate negotiation between heaven and earth, each harvest, each law, each story a thread woven into that cosmic contract. And when those threads weakened, their great cities fell. This is not just their story, it is ours. Perhaps that is why they still captivate us. They were the first to ask, in writing, the questions we still struggle with today. Why are we here? How do we live well? What is our place between the mortal and the divine? Their answer was not to retreat from the world, but to shape it through architecture, law, ritual, and myth into a reflection of higher order. They built ziggurats to bridge earth and sky, recorded epics to bridge memory and time, and honored principles that outlived their kingdoms. Now the question turns to us. What are we building? What will endure beyond our own walls of brick and glass? And will future generations look back at us and see a people aligned with the deeper order of life, or a culture that forgot its me, its guiding principles? If the Sumerians could speak across the ages, perhaps they would remind us that every person is a city in miniature, walls to defend, markets of exchange, temples of belief. And that, like Uruk, like Eridu, like all the first cities, we are at our strongest when those inner streets all lead back to the sacred center. So as you leave this story, carry with you not just the memory of the first civilization, but the challenge they still whisper. Live in such a way that your legacy, your words, your principles, your creations becomes a bridge between worlds and between ages. The rivers still flow, the stars still turn. The story is not over. It is only waiting for the next line to be written.